Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're super excited about this event honoring the 40th anniversary of Homegirls. Just super grateful to have this event and being able to talk to and speak with and honor and revere these Black feminist icons who have done so much for us. And we're so grateful. We're going to get started soon. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come in because we really want us to just bask in the presence of these Black feminist icons, right? Also, please feel free to use the group chat to share your name, your pronouns, and where you're based. We love to shout out folks. I see someone said, hello, everyone. I'm so excited. All right. Just feel free to share your name, your pronouns, and where you're based. We're about to get started soon. And also share what Homegirls means to you. We would love to have those responses as well. So we're going to get started in a few more moments. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Hi, Kay from Richmond, Virginia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello from Greensboro, North Carolina. Oh, wow, we have folks from New Orleans. Okay, Inglewood, California. Hi, Kelsey. Oh, you're from Spain. Welcome, Sandra. Hey, Z from Philly. How you doing? Hey, Olivia Polk from Durham. Wow, we have folks from Spain, Colorado, California. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be getting started soon. I'm just going to allow a few more folks to come in to the event. Thank y'all so much for being here. I see a lot of New Orleans folks here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, we are going to get started because I want to honor our time and honor this wonderful, beautiful space of celebrating 40 years of Homegirls. It's an honor to be here. My name is Jamie Swift. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director of Black Men Radicals. And if you're not familiar with Black Men Radicals, we are a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting and centering Black feminists, activism and movement building around the world. I am so delighted that we were able to organize this beautiful event honoring the 40th anniversary of Homegirls. But before I get started with the event, I want to establish that this space, the sacred space, is a safe space. We do not allow any homophobia, queerphobia, anti-Blackness, white supremacy, ableism, anything that is oppressive, we do not allow. So please be respectful to our guests, respectful in the chat, and just please honor this space. 40 years ago, Homegirls, the Black Feminist Anthology, was published in 1983 by Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, the first publishing house in North America devoted exclusively to publishing works by women of color. Edited by Black feminist icon Barbara Smith, Homegirls is a pioneering anthology that established the saliency of Black feminist literature, scholarship, experiences, and perspectives. In 2000, the anthology was reissued by Rutgers University Press, featuring profound essays and poems by Black feminists and lesbians, activists, organizers, and educators. Homegirls is a literary classic that not only politicized a generation of Black feminists then and now, but is an essential text examining the power of the Black feminist radical tradition. We're so happy to have our featured guests, Barbara Smith, Jewelle Gomez, Alexis De Veaux, and also Cheryl Clarke to discuss to offer remarks on the 40th anniversary of Homegirls. And we also have a wonderful intergenerational cohort of Black feminists, such as Dr. Carole Boyce Davies, Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Dr. Shana L. Redmond, Dr. Briona Simone Jones, Krystal Leaphart, Naomi Simmons-Thorne, Maya Marshall, Dr. Bettina Judd, Natalie Simone Toussaint, Reverend Irene Monroe, Micha Broadnax, and Emerald Faith, to share their thoughts and their remarks on the 40th anniversary of Homegirls. So before I ask Miss Barbara, Miss Cheryl, Jewelle, and Alexis to come on to speak about Homegirls and their organizing and editing Homegirls, I wanted to say that for me, Homegirls gave me a language. It gave me a language of a radical Black feminist theory and praxis. It translated to me that I have a place in this world, a world that was constructed for you and me and us not to be in it. It taught me that my Black feminist origin started at home at the kitchen table, where I witnessed the power and beauty of my grandmother, my mother, and aunties who've shaped me. Homegirls truly brought me home, and 40 years later, it has and continues to bring us home, and at this event this evening. So without further ado, I'm so happy that we can bring on Barbara Smith, Jewelle Gomez, and Cheryl Clarke, Jewelle Gomez, aka the Duchess, and Alexis De Veaux. And I will make sure to pin and spotlight everybody. So here we go. Spotlight right here.
And may I ask you something? Are you recording?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I am recording. Yes, it's on YouTube Live. So you almost scared me, Miss Barbara. I was like, oh my goodness, that would be devastating. Okay. So I'm about to pin multiple people so everyone is spotlighted. So first and foremost, I want to just say, like, I'm so honored that everyone said yes to being a part of this event. Like many of us said before we got started, we read your words, but many of us would never think that we would be able to meet and get to know such Black feminist icons. And I'm wondering what everyone's thoughts are on the 40th anniversary. How do you feel about 40 years of Homegirls?
Barbara?
So, of course, I thought of a remark in advance. You mean, how do we feel besides old? Yeah, so there's that. I'm just really glad, on the other side of being the ages that we are, I'm just glad that I lived this long to see some of this work be uplifted in the way that it is now, because of course, when it first appeared on Earth, there was not the kind of context for it being understood and for it to be just valued in the way that I think it has come to be. So I'm very happy about that.
Thank you, Miss Barbara. Anyone else want to offer their thoughts?
Well, I would say that one of the things to remember is, as each generation has talked about how much Homegirls meant to them, and I'm very proud to hear that. When we were doing our essays and Barbara was editing, it was all like magically new to us as well. Homegirls was the first anthology to have the words Black and feminist on the cover. And certainly for me, Homegirls, the essay that I wrote was the first really serious essay that I'd ever written for publication. So to think of us both as the seniors that we are now, but as the eager, radical young feminists, I think that we were when we were doing this work, I think it's helpful for other people.
Yeah, I'll follow Barbara and Jewelle by first acknowledging that in the 40 years, we've obviously lost a few of the contributors to this anthology, and I want to shout their names out. The ones that I know have gone on into their ancestor lives: Donna Allegra, June Jordan, Michelle Cliff, Audre Lorde, and there may be some others. So I want to acknowledge that the importance of the 40 years has also meant that we have had to see the going of some of the writers who were with us at the time that Homegirls came out. And I do want to indicate that I feel that Homegirls, the anthology, was an extraordinary event in a particular time. By that I mean we had in the 70s and the early 80s when Homegirls came out, there were a number of things that were happening that made it even more possible for Barbara to do the work that she was doing and for all of us to do the work that we were doing in terms of writing and organizing and being cultural workers. And by that I mean there was Laurie Sharp in 1973, who was one of the founders of the National Black Feminist Organization. There was a group called the Sisterhood that June Jordan and Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and Tazaki Shange and Verda Mae Grosvenor and a number of people were organizing and being involved with. There was, at least in my sense of New York City, a growing sense that there was some kind of literary renaissance that was happening, of which we were then a part. And I mean, there were workshops, there were all kinds of moments that were happening that served to uplift what Homegirls, the anthology, was about. And I think what it is and what it was always about was the future. What was going to be our assurance that there would be a Black feminist, Black lesbian feminist future? And in order to imagine the future, you have to create the present moment. And I think that is absolutely what Homegirls and Barbara, in terms of her vision, and all the people who helped you, Barbara, were trying to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, Miss Cheryl. How you doing?
I'm sorry to be late.
It's okay, Miss Cheryl.
Technical difficulties, as always.
It's so great to see
How are
you.
you? Good
I'm
evening,
doing-
everyone.
I'm doing well. No, I'm really happy you're here. We're just talking about how do you feel about 40 years of Homegirls? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd rather have 40 years of it than 40 years without it. Well, I feel, it was such a milestone and a coming of age for me and all of us who participated in it, in its publication and in its growth among us as we grew to appreciate it differently over these 40 years. And it's amazing how quickly 40 years can slip by. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. And 40 years later, it still has such a great, amazing impact.
yes, it does.
And I also wanted to ask Miss Barbara for you to share the origins of Homegirls. Because I think for some people, they do not know the origins. Obviously, if you read the anthology, but for those who don't, I think the origins of Homegirls and also how y'all know each other is also very important as well. And I love the camaraderie and the jokes and the laughs. And so I will, Miss Barbara, if you could offer such context to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who is a part of this and bringing back really important memories. So I have an illustration. I hope that people can see this.
Yeah.
This is Conditions 5, the Black Women's issue. It was published in 1979. And I'll hold it up just a little bit longer. If you have one of these, do guard it with your life, because now they're going for hundreds of dollars on line at places that are used book sellers. You can't really get this anymore because it's a collector's item. And this was a special issue of Conditions magazine, which was a writing of anthology, not anthology, I'm sorry, a journal of writing by women with an emphasis on writing by lesbians. And Jewelle and Cheryl actually were editors of Conditions in subsequent years after Conditions 5, actually. And it was really, really important. I brought another thing over to the computer. I brought another thing to show you, which is a more current issue. Can you ask people to turn down their
Yes, can somebody,
if they're not speaking?
can somebody
If they're
please,
not speaking, you turn down their sound. To
can
mute
somebody
themselves.
please mute their sound? We can hear you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank you. I couldn't really think to talk. Thank you very much. But in any event, this is a recent, fairly recent issue of Sinister Wisdom, which was founded the same year as Conditions, but still continues to publish well into the 21st century. And this is issue number 123 that came out, I believe, last year. And Cheryl was a co-editor of it. This is an entire issue of Sinister Wisdom that is a tribute to Conditions. And I have an article in it about my relationship to Conditions, because I didn't just do Conditions 5. I also wrote Toward a Black Feminist Criticism for Conditions 2. I did some reviews, etc. And as I said, if you want to dig deep into the origins of homegirls, then you have to look at Conditions. But it was clear that Conditions, of course, was going to become a back issue of a magazine, even though it sold more copies than I believe certainly than any other issue of Conditions up until that point. It became a back issue like any periodical. And so I did not want the writing in it to disappear. And that's why I decided to make it into an anthology. And that's where Homegirls came from. I do want to mention, I don't want to forget to mention that Rutgers University Press, which has been the publisher of Homegirls since 2000, is going to be bringing out a special 40th anniversary edition of Homegirls, for which I have recently written a new preface. And I don't know, like, to me, like I was telling people about it. I just finished it less than a week ago. But I've been telling people about it. I said, now there's a really long introduction to Homegirls. There's the 2000, preface, the preface to the new edition. And I said, and then there's going to be another preface. I don't know how much of that anybody really wants to read or see. But I trust it will be my last attempt at trying to talk about Homegirls in any kind of rational and reasonable way. But that's where it came from. Homegirls and Conditions 5 are not identical. There is work in each of them that is not in the other. There's new work in Homegirls that was not in Conditions, and there was some work in Conditions that is not in Homegirls. So if you can find a copy of, and I know there's some literary scholars, I was thrilled to hear some people introduce themselves before we got started about the graduate work that they're doing, or that they're PhDs in literature, obviously with an interest in this kind of subject matter. I'm sure that some people will want to do a deeper dive into the 2 volumes. But one of the things that's fascinating to me is that many of the writers in both Conditions 5 and in Homegirls, some of them being exactly the same writers, we were early in our careers at that point, and people went on to become much more established and recognized writers, and that seems to make Homegirls and Conditions 5 classics. And another definition of a classic is how long does it last, and how long are people interested in reading it. So that makes me feel really good about the work. And I met Jewelle before I came out, when my sister Beverly lived in Brooklyn and was married. And, and then I met Cheryl at the Socialist Feminist Conference that happened in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is where I think it was on Antioch College's campus. That was 1975. That's how I met Cheryl. And Alexis, I honestly can't remember exactly when we met, but all I can remember, because you didn't say it when you were talking about the literary scene. I don't think you said it when you were talking about the literary scene in New York in the early 80s. I don't think I heard you say anything about gap-toothed girlfriends, and also the salons that were real salons that Alexis used to have at her lovely apartment that was on one of the avenues that was
Eastern
was by
Parkway.
the park.
Eastern Parkway.
Yeah. And I will never
Parkway,
forget
Brooklyn.
those. Yeah, I will never
Yeah,
forget those.
Brooklyn.
I was near there just recently, but the thing is that it was like real salons in Brooklyn at Alexis's beautiful crib. So it was nice. It was very nice. And Jewelle was a gap-toothed girlfriend, and that was also an anthology collection of work that you all published too.
Thank you for sharing that context. And I also just love, like I said, the laughs, the friendship, everything. I'm learning something new each and every day, particularly working with Ms. Barbara, but from this conversation. I also wanted to ask each of you, you all wrote very powerful pieces in the anthology. Do you mind all sharing the socio-political context of why you wrote those specific pieces? Because I think for those who are not familiar with the anthology or who are of a younger generation, I think it's also important to know the struggle that you all went through so that we can, shout to the rooftops that we are Black feminists today. So do you mind sharing those sociopolitical contexts while writing your pieces for Homegirls?
Sure. My piece in Homegirls, and I think it's also in Conditions 5, is called The Sisters. And it's about two women who are lovers, who are addressing some of the questions of their relationship. Like one wants to have a child and the other doesn't see the need for that. And one has a child with a man. One of the members of this couple gets pregnant rather with a man. So I think part of what my piece wants to do, and when I look back on it now, I see that it was looking at, again, to speak to this question of the future, it was looking at future conversations, like how do we make family? How do we have heirs? One of the questions in the piece is, well, we need to have an heir. Yes, we're together, but we need to have heirs. So, and how do we have heirs as women who would understand themselves to be lesbians? What does it mean to have an heir? Is the heir the physical child, or is it the child that comes from the literature, that comes from the organizing, that comes from the theorizing? So I think The Sisters was my creative attempt to address questions that were on the table, but were also coming. How do we see ourselves in the future? Again, how do we create the future by thinking about the present? And The Sisters was one of the pieces that was in a play of mine, which was called No, and it was produced in 1980, I think it was. First directed by Glenda Dickerson at the Wow Cafe in the East Village. And then it was picked up by Woody King Jr. and it went to Henry Street Settlement House. And it was a work that, like The Sisters, attempted to look at what it meant to be Black, what it meant to be female, what it meant to be lesbian, what it meant to be political, what it meant to, as we would say today, exist while being Black, basically.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
The Duchess, would you like to share
You know, I was trying to remember if Barbara, if you asked me specifically to write about this, or if it was something I was ruminating on. I can't actually recall, but my piece is really about invisibility and, an issue that I think certainly Black lesbians still grapple with in this, Western culture. And the idea that in the mainstream culture, lesbians are kind of insignificant or in some cases don't seem to exist at all. And I felt like I wanted to look at some of the literature coming out in the lesbian community that included Black lesbians or lesbians of color, and to see where they got it right or where they got it wrong. So I ended up really making myself read a bunch of books that I was unfamiliar with, and that was great. But it ended up reinforcing my anxiety about how invisible Black lesbians are in mainstream culture and then in lesbian culture at that time, and how kind of marginalized we were. And the things that were interesting in that reading for me were how important I felt it was for lesbians, whenever they are included in fiction, to have some kind of context, not just be a character that pops in and pops out or is a support for another character, but to have the context of our lesbian lives in communities of color. And I really did not see enough of that. And when I did, I popped it out in some of the short stories that I'd read by Linda G. Brown and Julie Black Woman, and then, of course, Zami. And the other thing about Black lesbians' appearance in fiction for me was us always looking for home. And I think that's a common theme through lesbians of color, through women of color, how we make home with each other, with families, either biological or logical families. And I thought it was really important to be able to talk about that, because since lesbians are thought to be so invisible and Black women are often shifted to the margins, the importance of context and the importance of home to us was really valuable. And it's really sad to me that 40 years later, lesbian invisibility is still an issue in our communities. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. Ms. Cheryl, Ms. Barbara?
Well, I have two pieces in Homegirls. I have a short story called Women of Summer, which came out of my experience of being involved in political work around the defense of Assata Shakur in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and the failure to transform homophobia in the Black community. And I got the idea for the title from something the late Manning Marable, whom I admire, had said about an aspect of Black consciousness around sexuality. And I thought that as much as conscious Black people did so much to change the consciousness of other Black people during the 60s, especially during the Black Power movement. We were so woefully undeveloped around issues of sexuality and gender. Well, we didn't use that term so much then. Let me see if I can get back to what I was saying. That I should look at how Black people responded to homosexuality or same-sex sexuality. And of course, I looked at, first of all, the father we all love to hate, Leroy Jones or Amiri Baraka. And I thought it would also give me an opportunity to write about literature, Black literature, and to look at some of the homophobia evinced in those texts. So it was an opportunity I saw it as an opportunity for me to write about Black writing, as well as to write about our pronouncements about homosexuality. So, you know, that's how I came to write about homophobia in the Black community. And it wasn't until not many years after, but years after writing that many Black people came to me to connect to that piece and to talk about their experiences, excuse me, of being on the end of that homophobia. And I didn't think about it when I was writing it. Oh, this will be really good for Black people. It'll, you know, Black people will be able to, you know, this will help us, especially Black gay people. This will help us. But years after writing that piece, people would say to me that, oh, this was my experience. And, oh, I'm glad you wrote that. And, oh, I'm glad I wrote it too.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cheryl. And Ms. Barbara, would you like to offer some commentary on the sociopolitical context? And then we will get into this wonderful intergenerational cohort who will offer you all remarks about how Homegirls has impacted them.
You're asking about the political context of Homegirls being published and what was going on at the time?
Yes.
Or either the impact that it made? Well, those are, you know, complicated questions, but as has already been shared, we were not welcome. As I say nowadays, I said, we were not the popular girls. Nobody wanted to hear from us. Nobody really wanted to know with us. I just put a note in the chat about Manning Marable. If people are not familiar with him and his work, he was one of the brothers who was actually a brother and who was an ally and a co-conspirator with us. I said when many were not. I would change that to say when most were not. You know, we were on the margins, you know, of our communities. I think that the history of the Black arts movement, Cheryl mentioned, you know, the father, well, I won't say what she said. because he's no longer with us. But the thing is that a person who's problematic, who was problematic at the time, Leroy Jones / Amiri Baraka, and see, he may be the best known of all the people who were doing the same kinds of things and in the same doing the same kinds of work. It was very important. The Black Arts movement of the 1960s into the 1970s was pivotal. Nobody would argue with that, but I think that those of us who were coming out, during that period are either not out and hiding, and feeling the need to hide during that period. We had different kinds of experiences, and Homegirls was like a line in the sand in many ways. And, having just written this preface that I was telling you about, I thought about, what it did, where people were at the time. One of the things that I'll say, which is not exactly about the political, it's not a direct answer to the question that you asked, but I did want to kind of get it out, is that I explained why the original edition of Homegirls looked the way that it did. And that was because I wanted it to have the same kinds of African designs and also black and white, beautiful black and white graphics that Elaine Locke's The New Negro had. And I literally, the book was originally going to be published by Persephone, and I didn't have my own copy of the New Negro at the time, which is a book that is considered to define the Harlem Renaissance. So I went to the Boston Public Library because I started working on the book when I lived in Boston. I finished it in Brooklyn. But the thing is that I went to the Boston Public Library, I photocopied pages of the New Negro, and I took them to Persephone. I said, I want my book to look like this. And they did indeed make my book look like that. The original cover of Homegirls, which is going to be restored in the Rutgers, this will be the third edition. That textile, that African textile that was used on the cover, some of that will be restored. Also, my book, The Truth That Never Hurts, which is also published by Rutgers, is going to be redone, repackaged, so that they're kind of a package and will have similar kind of design elements. And then the internal design of Homegirls also has black and white graphics of African, African images. And one of the things I wrote in this preface is that I wanted, it was like kind of like doing a in your face kind of thing, or like, you say we're not a part of the Black community. Well, I'll show you. My book is not only going to have like, Black stuff, it's going to have African design. So there, and then also I did have thoughts at the time that this might be a book that would be seen in later years as launching a new era of literary production, namely a Black feminist and Black women's literary renaissance. And that's exactly, I think, what it turned out to be. So I'm happy about everything having to do with Homegirls. Really happy that some of you major contributors are with us this evening, and happy also that Jamie Swift and Black Women Radicals had the foresight to commemorate this occasion of the 40th anniversary year. There's a lot of history embedded in those pages, and that's great. I'm happy, as I said. There you are.
Yes.
I have mine too.
I got mine too.
Mine is right on the desk. I'm gonna hold mine up too.
Well, this is so beautiful.
I had it on the desk for the preface, but Carole. See, you can tell something about who has the original, copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because that means you got it some years ago.
Right. Who has it and knows where it is. Can remember where it is.
That too.
Well, this is,
and the Rutgers, I'm into the design stuff. If people know me, I'm really into the design of anything that I'm involved with. The Rutgers edition is beautiful too. And one of the things I did with the Rutgers edition is that it has lots of different women of color on the cover, not all of African heritage. And that was quite intentional. It came out in 2000. That's post This Bridge Called My Back. You know, everything that had happened from the 80s to 2000 until 2000. I thought, yeah, homegirls with women of color, because of course we were always in solidarity with women of color. So that's what the beautiful, that's a beautiful cover too for the Rutgers edition.
Well, thank you all for your remarks. It's been such an honor to speak with you and have this sort of roundtable from the editor and author, or contributor, excuse me, of Homegirls. We are now going to get into the remarks by an intergenerational cohort of amazing Black feminists. The first remarks will be by Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and she pre-recorded her message, and I will be sharing this message right now. Let's see. Can everyone hear?
That honestly, hello, loved ones. And I can say that honestly because everyone who loves this book, Homegirls, is family to me. My name is Sister Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and I am jealous that I don't get to be with you all in real time at this epic, crucial gathering celebrating one of the most important texts ever, in my opinion. I wish I could time travel. I'm somewhere else giving a lecture right now. But honestly, if I could really time travel, I would time travel to be at the actual promotional events for Homegirls. I would be up there grooving with Castleberry and Dupree and hearing everybody read from their work for the first time. There is no way to overstate the importance of Homegirls and the impact it had. I think about your vision, Barbara Smith. I think about those early versions and excerpts and pieces of your writing, Alexis De Veaux, Cheryl Clarke, Jewelle Gomez. Your writing has actually been the home that I have been able to return to over and over again. The impact at the time for emerging writers, but also for folks who were coming into themselves and seeking home. I love the story that Barbara Smith, you tell about the man who told you he slept with homegirls underneath his pillow, like a Bible or like something that through osmosis would just make his dreams better. It really is and was a dream come true for so many folks. I love thinking about this, I don't know, this, maybe I'm telling tales out of school, but in the Audre Lorde papers at Spelman College, there's a photo of you, Barbara, cutting a cake, and it's at one of the release events for Homegirls, but it's mislabeled as a wedding photo. And so I think of it as a mistake, but also a truth that this book and your commitment to our community and our possible future are completely intertwined. That's the type of commitment I think was being celebrated that day. But beyond the impact of this special book at the time, and I am so honored to be holding this copy, which is not the copy that I first read. I read a different edition that has, you know, the circle of faces, and there's Kathy Cohen's one of the people on the cover. This copy belonged to my dear mentor, Cheryl Green, and she has kept it intact. So it has a letter from Alice Walker promoting the book in here. It has a note telling where to send your book reviews to, paper clipped on the inside. And it's one of the most sacred items that I could ever touch. It's sacred because it's made out of the loving commitment that each of you offered us. And I just want to actually go about 5 years before Homegirls to Conditions 4, which I quote all the time, to read from this beautiful collection of Black feminist letters that you, Barbara, and Beverly Smith compiled. And it's called I Am Not Meant to Be Alone and Without You Who Understand, Letters from Black Feminists, 1972 to 1978. And I feel like this passage is my own life origin story. So in the introduction, explaining why it makes sense to actually publish the letters of living Black feminists between each other, this is speaking about how these letters create a space of homecoming, of family, combating the isolation of Black feminists who are, many of whom were in different institutions in different cities, felt like the only Black feminist in the world because they may have been the only out Black feminist in their town. And then it gets to this point. Articles are not usually written about letter writers who are still alive and active. This kind of attention is generally paid to the correspondence of important historical figures long gone. One thing we know as Black feminists is how important it is for us to recognize our own lives as herstory. Also, as Black women, as lesbians and feminists, there is no guarantee that our lives will ever be looked at with the kind of respect given to certain people from other races, sexes, or classes. There is similarly no guarantee that we or our movement will survive long enough to become safely historical. We must document ourselves now. I read that passage over and over again, along with the part at the end of the Combahee River Collective statement that talks about, because we have some skills in the area of publishing, we're using that as part of our Black feminist work. Because what I know is that the moment that you wrote that, and the way that it rung true in the commitment of the writers in the late 70s and early 80s who insisted on documenting a Black feminist tradition, is that you were doing that for those of us who would come after. And I include myself in that number. I was not born when this collection came out in Conditions 4. I was a little baby when Homegirls was published. And that means that I emerged into a world with self-identified Black feminists and with a literature and with a home place where I could be who I needed to be. And I'm only one. Of course, there are so many of us, and many of us are part of this gathering, and many of us are not. I cannot overstate what it means to have a home place prepared for us before we even know we need it. And my commitment is that absolutely our movement is historical. It will survive. As the pins on the Freedom Organizing pamphlet series say, Black feminism lives. And I'm so, so grateful. I'm so grateful every day for the love that you shuttled forward directly into our lives. I love all of you. I'm grateful every day. It is an honor to be part of this beautiful gathering, and love to each person who knew that this was the place to be tonight. I'm with you across time and space, with love forever. Bye.
That was Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And so what more can I say? That was so beautiful, right? We have up next the wonderful Dr. Carole Boyce Davies, who's a distinguished professor and internationally recognized scholar of African diaspora studies and Black women's writing in global context. So Dr. Boyce Davies, we're so happy to have you here, and I'm about to pin you right now. So if you didn't mind offering your thoughts, and thank you.
I am so pleased. Oh, amazing to follow Alexis. She has such a beautiful spirit that just comes through when she speaks. It's so lovely. Anyway, I made some notes because I'm one of those people. I don't want to drift everywhere. So I always kind of orient myself and make some notes of what I'm going to say so that it's pretty clear. Anyway, so first of all, the copy that I have that I just showed came out in 1983. The same year that I began my professional career at Binghamton University, SUNY. And it was really interesting because I was hired to teach African American literature. But a grad student had offered a course on Black women writers before I got there. Alice Deck, actually, she was the prof in Illinois. And then, so they said, oh, you should teach that class. I was amazed that, I could actually inherit and move right into teaching a Black women writers course. So immediately, of course, one starts trying to create one's own syllabus, one's own readings, and so on. So immediately, this became one of the texts that would be part of my syllabi in Black women writers courses. There were a few other books around one could use. We would add later collections by Mary Helen Washington, and of course, the famous Brave. But what is significant, the second point I want to make is that the publication was significant for several reasons. And one, of course, is that it came out with the imprint of Kitchen Table Woman of Color Press. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. And back then, it was quite significant for students to really empower themselves, knowing that the logic of Kitchen Table could actually produce literary scholarship, intellectual work, and so on. And interestingly, that logic has empowered several other publishing companies by Black women around the world, such as, the Cassava Republic Press by Bibi Bakari Yusuf, Iabea in London, outside of London, in Banbury, and so on. And there are many more in the Caribbean as well. Definitely the work of Margaret Busby in London, who created that amazing Daughters of Africa collection. But in other words, before then, we venerated publishing enterprises with certain histories. And actually, as young profs, you end up struggling to get your work published because various universities did not honor non-university and independent presses. That's important to say for the young scholars listening, that this is not easy, that this happened. This was like, it was long struggle because they would want you to have your publishing done by, the mainstream presses, and then those mainstream presses were not particularly interested in doing work on Black women, and you understand why. So basically, when I sent out letters to various presses, when we did NAMBICA Studies of African Women and Literature, we sent it to like 27 presses. And almost all of them sent back letters, really nice letters saying, this is cute and nice, but we don't really do that kind of work. And then one day, Africa World Press came by and gave me a business card indicating that they were starting publishing. And this actually was one of the first texts in this series. So I believe we became the first anthology in their line of work. But the third point I want to make is that the model of creating critical anthologies, people like me learn from homegirls. The other text which is interesting was 30 Black Bridges, which was a similar kind of work, but did a kind of combination of literature and criticism and so on. But these were instrumental works. Since then, and since I had studied African literature, which was then largely male writers, the implications of what was often in Homegirls and in Brave became generating themes that we could similarly pursue in African literature and then subsequently Caribbean literature. And I would say have informed many other fields. In fact, anthologies like this one became foundational to develop an entire field of study. And that's the point I think we need to make, that these works, and Barbara made that point just a while ago, that these works were works that created fields. And we didn't realize it then because we were just putting together work and trying to make sure that stuff that was not covered in the mainstream text were now available. and ended up being texts that defined entire fields, as we did with African women in African literature, and of course, Caribbean women in literature, which followed. And then subsequently, I did with Molara Ogundipe a double issue called Moving Beyond Boundaries, International Dimensions of Black Women's Writing, which was one of the first collections to include essays, poems, interviews by Black women writers from Brazil, and so on. Now, interestingly, grad students can learn how to put together an anthology, Barbara, which is fascinating to me as well, because for people like you, Maya Figueroa, that's a project that she has the grad students do in Michigan, for example.
Mm.
So we learned, in other words, we learned from this. And I was really happy and curious when I heard you say that the influence for you was also the New Negro collection, because I see now the link with those images. And somebody in the chat mentioned the referencing of African sculptural images and various forms that begin various chapters. So that's interesting continuity there. But I want to say, though, for people like me coming from Trinidad and Tobago as a student and then working in the United States, the framing, and keep in mind, I went back home and worked in Trinidad because I had a scholarship from the Trinidadian government to study African literature in Nigeria. Part of it meant I had to go back and work, and I did. And when I came back one summer, I said, because I was teaching when I went back home, mostly American mainstream and British literature, and I was like, just trained in African lit and coming back and having to do that. So I was so frustrated. When I came back, I said, if I found a job that summer, I would just stay, and I did. So actually ended up working at Binghamton University. But what was significant, and that's the fourth point I want to make, is that the framing of the content included Black and third world women in Homegirls. And it provided, therefore, a copious framework for which we could do Black women writers in international context. I was just looking at it, and I saw Louisa Tisha's work on spirituality, which included stuff on voodoo and African-based religious practices in New Orleans and Haiti and so on. And then Homegirls in particular included creative work by people like Michelle Cliff. If I could write this in fire, I would write this in fire. And definitely Cheryl Clarke's famous essay on homophobia in Black communities was read and debated by students consistently in that time frame as well. And definitely the work of June Jordan, particularly students would read her poem about my rights, and it was often read at Take Back the Night events on campus. A whole generation of my students then grew up with these anthologies and what we know just outside it as their staple. In those days, and I am not casting any aspersions on the current generation, but students were avid readers who came to class ready to debate their positions. And I noticed that's not so much available, at least I haven't seen it at Cornell recently, where students actually came to argue down, fight about their positions, and read everything, and they knew what they were talking about. So those were heady days of Black feminist politics in which people sought to transform, and they transformed the departments in which we worked, though some have regressed. I was quite impressed then to see the issues in the introduction, in the preface, and it says, I'm reading it, some of the issues we have worked on are reproductive rights, equal access to abortion, sterilization, abuse, healthcare, childcare, the rights of the disabled, violence against women, rape, battering, sexual harassment, welfare rights, lesbian and gay rights, educational reform, housing, legal reform, women in prison, aging, police brutality, labor organizing, anti-imperialist struggles, anti-racist organizing, nuclear disarmament, and preserving the environment. This is amazing just to read that. That's 40 years ago, guys. So what happened? What really happened in the world? Because we're still dealing with those issues again. Questions of reproductive rights are back on the table. But what was fascinating for me as well was learning from what was written in those collections, like Bernice Reagan's Coalition Politics, and therefore attending every Sweet Honey in the Rock concert that came close enough. Definitely meeting and inviting the writers, some of them you've seen, Miss Annie, Alexis De Veaux, Jewelle Gomez, Barbara Smith. And I also, this is an amazing piece to add, Anne Ellen Shockley was the librarian in my undergrad university. As an undergrad, I had no idea how she identified, nor did I know that one of my favorite professors, Mary Fair Burks, was one of the co-founders of the Women's Political Council, which launched the Montgomery bus boycott. So basically, we were so in such good fortune to have amazing people like that who were orienting us without knowing how significant they were in the grand scheme of things and in the struggles that were existing at the time, and therefore the struggles that were to come. So these days, then, I'm still wondering how these amazing years went by so quickly, and now we are part of, now 40 years later, an intergenerational panel, being on the elder side of that intergeneration.
Mhm.
Yet, as we learn from homegirls, examples of writing, organizing, teaching, doing the work, as what the Lord would say, we also hope we can continue to pass on both our mistakes as correctives and our gains for emulation. This is the joy of stopping to celebrate homegirls today, and it comes with a big note of thanks for all this work that you've done. A lot of respect and much love for you, sister friends and colleagues, and all the young scholars who are listening and those in the audience who tuned in. Much love. One love.
Thank you, Dr. Boyce Davies. Someone commented that they love your library back there. So
Yeah.
So next up, we have Dr. Shana L. Redmond, who's a professor of English and Comparative Literature in the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Race at Columbia University. Dr. Redmond also has a pre-recorded message as well, which I will be sharing soon. And y'all don't need to see my personal business, okay? Here it goes right here. It's on my emails. Okay. I'm about to play Dr. Redmond's message.
From the very first lines, spoken conversationally by the Barbara Smith, I'm taken in and taken aback. The epigraph, the opening, the conjuncture is in and of the home, in and of our imperfect interior spaces in which we curate love and life and make ways from no way at all. But I just get so frustrated, she said, because I feel people don't understand where we came from. When I look at the photographs in our scrapbook, I think if they looked at the house, would they understand better? Because of where we were living, the size of the rooms, sometimes I do wish people could just see us in the context we grew up in, who our people are. I'm stunned to return to this evidence at this time, to return to this work as I think about this very thing, the home. As I consider how these places of intimacy know and keep us, challenge and sometimes destabilize us, but are where we return to look and listen. The sounds of these spaces are our inner vibrations, our bodies' rhythms made external, our hearts and dreams broken open, our way of announcing with love who our people are. How do we know these people? We know them from our scrapbooks, images and letters, the flowers and sketches preserved in pages curled by the salt of our fingertips, or wrapped in plastic to last all time. We know them from shoe boxes overflowing with mementos and stored on dark shelves or under beds, the preserved patches of wallpaper where their artwork or childhood photographs hung, scarves and lace passed from generation to generation, the stolen glances between women curious about and desirous of another kind of love. We know them in the groove between, the groove that pulls loved ones from their seats after cooking for hours, the sounds of sweet honey in the rocks, harmonies in defense of disreputable, forgotten, and glorious Black women, the croon of Nat King Cole, growl of Big Mama Thornton, or velvet touch of Michelle Ndegeocello. What if we stood still, safely, in full light of the critical thought embedded in the laughter and tears, wise words and dozens that compose the score of our living? What if we feared no one, no trespass, no invasion, no violence? Could our living rooms and kitchens, could our homes be further fortified, becoming spaces of discovery and recovery of our own design? Who then would be liberated? Homegirls gave us and gives us the task of these questions and visions towards answers through deep reading and critical care work in a moment that remains a time of lynchings, as Smith described 1999. She and Jewelle Gomez and Alexis De Veaux and so many other protectors held and hold firm the lamplight, searching and probing and requesting that we do the same. My people are in this book. These lesbian and queer Black women thinkers and creators and mothers and lovers and fighters and confidants who remind me that Black women as a group have never been fools. We couldn't afford to be. The limits to our affordances do not end there, as our ability to live fully in our bodies with the loves who we carefully choose is everywhere challenged. There is much to rage over and against, much still to grieve. As you read this work for the first time or again, I follow Smith in my sincere hope that Homegirls is upsetting, because being upset is often the first step toward change. I, for one, am livid and grateful for what that fire has inspired in me and how it continues to burn. Thank you all for the model and demand. May we return it tenfold to those who follow after us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Redmond. Appreciate you so much. Up next, we have the wonderful Naomi Simmons-Thorne, who is a graduate student and educator. She is currently at the University of South Carolina, where she studies teacher instruction, qualitative research, foundations, and philosophy of education. And Naomi was recently awarded the distinction of becoming the inaugural recipient of the Cheryl A. Wall Prize in Black Women's Studies. So thank you, Naomi. I'm about to put a spotlight on you now.
All right, I'll go ahead. So for the sake of time and out of the respect for the inevitable words that are sure to follow me, I've prepared a brief written statement that I will read during my allotted time. And in doing so, I hope this statement will give testimony and bear some witness to the ever unfolding legacies of the Black women movement makers with whom we are here to honor their work, their praxis, their writings, but most mainly for our purposes here tonight, their reckoning titled The Homegirls Anthology. So I'd like to start my statement off with revisiting a profound question from a little known article by the late great Monica Roberts, Black transgender journalist and tireless activist and campaigner for Black transgender liberation. In her 2008 article, Black Feminism and Trans Women, What's the 411? Roberts concludes on a note of deep ambiguity, querying, this inquiring mind wants to know and is curious to hear what Black feminists have to say regarding their trans sisters. Upon reading this passage, I at once felt deep regret for the immense social and political isolation encountered by so many of my elders, all the while feeling so fortunate for my own pathway to social and political consciousness that foreclosed the need for such considerations. Early in the development of my political and feminist consciousness, I had access to a plethora of radical texts that bore the imprint of the women of Homegirls, whether explicitly in name or in intellectual influence. Their presence permeated. The Homegirls Anthology was certainly one of those texts. I remember discovering the second edition published by Rutgers University Press. Opening up its pages as Barbara, through the praxis of the letter, opened up the doors to Black feminism and the Black radical tradition to me. For so many Black transgender women of the past, and for too many Black transgender women today, this door has functioned as the kind of Mason-Dixon line that kind of precludes our passage into visibility, Black constituency, and also home. Imagine then what it must have felt to read Barbara's 1999 introduction, where she writes, and I quote, "Transgender liberation belongs on any Black feminist agenda." The endurance of the indomitable women with whom we are sharing this space, their praxis, their writings, and their work is ultimately premised on the strength and transcendence of their principles, which in a very unusual fashion has had the unusual tendency to position these women on the correct side of justice in each generation of global political movement building that they have not only participated in and have often led, but in some instances even created. The power and the endurance of Homegirls is not confined to any one excerpt contained therein, but I'd be remiss if I didn't, so therefore it must be noted how nestled within this grand tapestry of global influence given rise by the book, on a personal level, Homegirls simply gave this girl home. In my academic work as a philosopher of education, I explore the political and philosophical dimensions of education. And this work, especially as of late, is work and discourse that cannot be understood but through the work of Ms. Margaret Smith. In February, when the College Board released its revision of the AP African American Studies course, whose work and what work was conspicuously taken out? Black Feminist Studies, Black Queer Studies, the Combahee River Collective Statement, Black Lesbian Writers, Identity Politics, texts and works preserved for many of us, and for many of us first encountered within the Homegirls Anthology. The site where for among the first time in political, intellectual, and literary history, these strands of Black radicalism would collide. Let's take time to just appreciate the sheer epistemic revolution spurred by the Homegirls Anthology and the others like it, many once again that bear the names of these women, either in name or in spirit. Lastly, I want for us to consider the rise of global right-wing populism and what challenges it has wrought for Black feminist movement building and knowledge production. To do so, I would like for us to consider what would happen if we understood these anthologies, Homegirls, But Some of Us Are Brave, and so many more as not just books, but as curriculum, classes, pedagogy, and whole schools. This would reconstitute our understanding of the global rights attempt to foreclose the public to Black feminism. For then, these occlusions are not just book bans, they are school closings and evictions. And who wins when schools like Homegirls are closed to the public and to the communities from which they belong? What are we all doing to ensure this knowledge is passed down and passed on to others? These are the questions that we will grapple with for some time, but for today, I hope it will just suffice to say thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Naomi. Woo! That was so beautiful. Next up, we have Briona Simone Jones, who's an assistant professor in English, specializing in African American literature, feminist and queer theory, and Black studies. Jones has published a collection of Black lesbian writings titled Mouths of Rain, an anthology of Black lesbian thought, the most comprehensive anthology centering Black lesbian thought to date. So I will be spotlighting you, Briona. Here you are right here.
Hello. I feel so, hi, Jewel. I finally get to see you. Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Barbara. Hello, Alexis. Man, I feel so blessed, so honored to be here. Dr. Davies, you mentioned that Homegirls actually created this paradigm for graduate students to produce anthologies. I was that graduate student under the tutelage of Yomira Figueroa, who introduced me to Cheryl Clarke. And not to just go off point, but yeah, the impact of your work is beyond articulation. So of course, when I think about home, I need to start with Barbara and think about how many of the rooms of our own that you have really made possible. I'd really be remiss if I didn't talk about or chart your intellectual odyssey. And so we get the production of Homegirls in 1983. But I want to go back to 1978 when you wrote and toured a Black feminist criticism I finally do not know how to begin, because in 1978, I want to be writing this for a Black feminist publication, for Black women who know and love these writers as I do, and who, if they do not yet know their names, have at least profoundly felt the pain of their absence. And toward a Black feminist criticism, you taught me how to be a critic. You taught me how to write from an enclosure. And I really think about not even just toward a Black feminist criticism, but after you create that particular essay, you build the field of Black women's studies, right? And I'm amazed at your mind, right? You know, you have not only 1981 you're creating, but some of us are brave, but you found Kitchen Table Women of Color Press. And when we think about survival, I really did not think that survival as a Black lesbian was possible. I met so many of you in page first. I never met you in person, but really your words helped shape who I became. And to be honest, I'd really be remiss if I didn't talk about how the home that you all created in the field of Black lesbian studies, right? Let's be clear that there would be no Black lesbian studies, there would be no Black queer studies, there would be no Black study if you all had not collectively created this vestibule for all of us to pass through, right? And to create our own ideas and to become scholars. Speaking of scholarship, I wouldn't be a professor of Black queer studies teaching courses exactly how I want to treat them, right? Teach them had you all not have made so many sacrifices. And I know that the sojourn has not been easy. I know that oftentimes you have been elided from contributors to this proverbial canon, but please know that you have children. You have, not in a sort of captive maternal kind of way, but in a queer kinship kind of way, right? You have created and given life to us, right? Like literal lives, right? And Alexis and Cheryl and Jewelle, I just want to speak briefly just about the profundity of your mind too. I'd also be remiss if I didn't quote Cheryl really quickly. 1 second. I name myself lesbian because this culture oppresses, silences, and destroys lesbians, even lesbians who don't call themselves lesbians. I name myself lesbian because I want to be visible to other Black lesbians. I name myself lesbian because I do not subscribe to predatory, institutionalized heterosexuality. I name myself lesbian because I want to be with women and they don't have to call themselves lesbians. I name myself lesbian because it is part of my vision. I name myself lesbian because being woman identified has kept me sane. I call myself Black too because Black is a part of my aesthetic, my politics, my vision, my sanity. Whoa. And although you write that also in 83, you know, I'm thinking about how, you know, you all being birthed through the Black arts movement, that naming was really the linchpin, right, of your personal and political politic. And so to this day, I name myself lesbian because of you all collectively, right? Jewelle, from 1981 to 2005, you continued to ask, where are Black lesbians in fiction, right? And you taught me about the precision of an argument, right? How to stay steadfast in identifying that chasm, but also how to fill the lacuna, right? With the Gilda stories, your mind, brilliant. I am because you are, right? Alexis, man, what can I say about you, right? You really taught me that Blackness is full and deep and tough and tender. You were a playwright, a writer, novelist. It's like, what form have you not made love to and made your own?
Goodness.
You teach me that pleasure is limitless. And so I don't want to talk too much, but literally, like who I've become, who I am still becoming, was made possible because of your generosity. Thank you for answering my emails. Thank you for bringing Miles of Rain to fruition for the very little bit of money that I had. I really study you. I am obsessed with the intellectual life that you have created for all of us. I am obsessed with creating and naming that there's not only a Black lesbian radical tradition, there is a Black lesbian aesthetic. And yeah, I'm real happy. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Briona. Like, I'm about to cry, y'all. Lord have mercy. Oh my goodness.
No, because it's the truth. Like, no, like for real, you really created this life for us. Like, I'm so sorry that the Academy did not respect you. I am so sorry that these institutions continue to elide you, but like, we will avenge you, like for real. And
thank you. There's a direct line from Homegirls to Miles of Rain.
Yeah.
Direct line.
Continuum.
Wow. Thank you so much, Briona. Truly, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have the wonderful Nala Toussaint, who works with people across the spectrum of identities, social and economic realities to support their health goals and well-being. She is the founder of Reuniting of African Descendants. And ROAD is a trans-led grassroots initiative invested in equity, collective growth, and healing of TLGBTQIA plus SGL people of African descent. Her work is rooted in ending the genocide against trans and queer people. I'm about to spotlight you right now, Nala. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My heart is full. There is a fullness in just not my heart, but my body. And so first, I just want to open by saying I am so honored to be here today, to just share the space with so many of the folks in the room and to speak about the impact of Homegirls and just show my appreciation. Just to be in the space with the presence of Barbara, Alexis, Cheryl, Jewelle, thank you. And I just start with, there's nothing more important to me than home. There is nothing more important to me than home. And I just think about the work that I do is it's rooted in the road. When I think about Reuniting of African Descendants road, I think about how all roads lead to home. And so I think that road on my journey has had me find a tool, Homegirls, which is such a classic literature. It has influenced me beyond my own understanding. And even in this moment talking, the words from all of you written continues to dance in me as someone who is a dancer and miss dancing as an expression of home and home being in the body. The words still dance with me and they carry me through my survival and push me from survival to thriving. I know firsthand the importance of representation and amplifying marginalized voices. Every time we create room for a Black voice in the intersection of Blackness, womanhood, and queerness to be heard, we make progress toward a world that is equitable and just. And when I think about for Black feminists, this book has been such a critical tool for understanding our experiences and creating a movement that challenges patriarchy, racism, and heteronormativity. It is a tool that in my work I use to end genocide against trans, non-binary, two-spirited, and queer, same-gender loving people across the African diaspora. The words as I think about this book and the release of the book and the moving through the book and the dance of the book is how it brings us through the feeling, the empathy of grieving and grief and love and liberation and birth and rebirth and celebration, pain, intimacy, a pace of reclaiming identities. It's the Black Women Bible, the call in, the call out, the march, the rally. Everything is in that book that you feel even to today, that we get to feel even through today, that we get to use as a tool even till today. And so as a Black Afro-Caribbean woman of trans experience, this book has been a lifeline for me. Again, providing language and tools to articulate my experiences and for those other Black women across the identity spectrum. It allowed me to understand that, as Audre Lorde said, I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. Alexis, Cheryl, Jewelle, the Duchess, Barbara, you all have made significant contributions to Black feminist movement through your groundbreaking work, and for that I am forever grateful. Your work shines a light on the experience of Black women and marginalized groups and the challenges for us to build and move through all that we move through and all that we hold each and every day, every minute, every second. Thank you, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nala. That was so beautiful. Everything has been so, so beautiful. Thank you. Next up, we have Krystal Leaphart, who is an award-winning organizer and strategist from Detroit, Michigan. She brings more than a decade of experience in legislative advocacy and grassroots activism to build power towards a world that is equitable for all people, especially Black women and girls. So I am going to, once I find you, Krystal, pin you. Let me see. Oh, here you are right here. I'm going to pin you so everybody can see you wearing the Black Feminist Taught Me t-shirt. Woo woo.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for the introduction. Again, my name is Krystal Leaphart. I am a proud Black feminist organizer, reproductive justice advocate, and particularly interested in all the ways that Black women and femmes engage in electoral process or decide not to engage. Again, it is truly an honor and a privilege to be amongst the lineup tonight. When Jamie reached out, it was an easy yes, but when I started to think about what I actually wanted to say, I had no clue where to start. I think it's so much easier to spend an hour talking about things or more time, but trying to reduce all of the feels and feelings and such to 3 to 5 minutes is a challenge, but I'm going to do the best to try to stick to that time today. As I was reading the book, I had a lot of different dreams and a lot of different things going on in how I was processing the information. And I really took a lot of time to try to figure out what was going on with me. I typically dream for very specific reasons. Books don't usually make me dream and such like that. But in talking with my therapist, she explained, helped me figure out why I was having so many feelings. I could over-intellectualize what the feelings were. I could really draw the larger words out and such, but I just wanted to be very real and honest in saying that the book really pushed me to do more reflecting than anything else, reflecting on my own politics, reflecting on how I'm showing up, reflecting on what accountability looks like. I was having dreams about conflicts that I've had in the past with Black women and femmes. I had dreams about women that I love dearly in my life. So that really pushed me to think about what was coming from that in that accountability piece specifically. And some things that came up was how we should all be aiming to be reflective, how we should all be aiming to be accountable to each other in the best ways that we know how to, and also just be committed to growth. And I'm thinking about and holding on to that, what my contributions can be in the next 40 years of Black feminist organizing. So I am committed, and I'm hoping that we can all collectively continue to commit to demanding that we remain rigorous in our studies and true to our values as Black feminists, and exploring what different kinds of Black feminisms fit the best of what we can contribute to. In the midst of the attacks on Black feminist scholarship coming from, it's so weird that they call themselves the right, but we'll just go with it, the right, banning and the silencing and the redefining all these concepts and terms that are written there, but God forbid they pick up a book and read something, really figure out how to defend each other and hold each other in these times of unprecedented but very predictable attacks on Black feminist studies and scholarships and theory. In the midst of that, keeping that in mind, also knowing that what you all model for us is, yes, there's theory and yes, there's praxis in academia, but there's also organizing, there's also people, there's also the ground game as well. So really holding all those things is a mandate for me. And also being in principled, and I say principled in bold, if it was written, it would be bold, principled struggle and conflict. We know that we have so many things to work through within our communities to make sure that we truly show up in beloved community. And that means calling in and calling out any behavior that does not exhibit what beloved community should look like. That means centering the experiences of Black lesbians and Black trans women and Black trans folks in general, and anybody that feels othered by our communities. In more specific ways for me, that looks like engaging with organizations like Black Women Radicals and Black Feminist Futures. And I missed it in the beginning, but I do have to shout out Jamie again for just being such a responsible steward with this platform, and making sure that we stick to our values as much as possible. And I'm also claiming abundance in funding opportunities and support for organizations like Black Feminist Fund as well, that can really just be, create different experiences for organizers so that we all continue to have more support. So I'll close in saying that again, I am super committed for the next 40 years of organizing. Super excited to be here, and I can't wait to continue to dream up more Black feminist blueprints and visions with you all. And thank you so much for the contributions via Homegirls.
Thank you so much, Krystal. That was so beautiful once again. Next up, we have Dr. Bettina Judd, who is an interdisciplinary writer, artist, and performer whose research focus is on Black women's creative production and our use of visual art, literature, and music to develop feminist thought. Her recent book, Feelin', Creative Practice, Pleasure, and Black Feminist Thought, argues that Black women's creative production is feminist knowledge production produced by registers of effect she calls feelin'. So, Dr. Judd, thank you for being here. And I'm about to pin you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, for thinking of me for this important gathering. I also want to keep my remarks short. I prepared them so that I could try to, but as everyone was talking, I also wanted to make these notes, like, thank you so much also to Carole Boyce Davies. I'm so honored to be in your presence right now. I was just speaking to my students the other day of your concept of it's not everything you can talk, but in Black women writing and identity. So it's just really an honor to be in this space, honoring folks who are absolutely important to my own intellectual path, and honoring with folks who are important to my own intellectual path. Also, in hearing Briona's words about toward a Black feminist criticism, I want you to know, Barbara, this text is so pivotal to me. It's the first text in the current graduate course that I teach called Advanced Black Feminist Creativity. And every time it is taught, and it is taught as a new books course, your essay is the first text in this new books course. Your rhetorical turns have deeply influenced me in my own work. So my first academic published article, Toward a Methodology of Anger, steps into the permission that you have made, the passageway that you built in the first lines of your essay. I do not know where to begin. You allowed me to say, let me begin here. And so I'm just so grateful for you. So realizing that Homegirls turns 40 this year meant also realizing that Homegirls has been here my whole life, and for my life, having also turned 40 this year. And what a privilege that is. What a relief. Relief, the word, because Barbara Smith laid out the truths, the home truths from the get-go, that Black feminist radical thought and action is powerful, that the simultaneity of oppression, we now call this intersectionality, that Black feminist politics addresses must be met with radical reckoning that cuts it out from the root, and not a milquetoast approach to oppression, which only makes way for oppressive forces to grow another limb. I did not have to lie or dismember myself for the sake of a Black collective. And also what a relief your presence was there at Mount Holyoke College, my first academic job. What a relief. What a relief for this to have been, for this best description of love that I know for myself, given to us by Alexis De Veaux. You mine, Yes, but you can't own me. Thank you for the ripe language of queer love and action, of sensuality and genre be damned image making. This was the closest thing to a QR code directing us to a short film that 1983 could offer. What a relief that I had a culture to step into a Black lesbian literary imagination to uncover and revel in. Thank you, the Duchess Jewelle Gomez, for making clear the connection between our representation and our capacities to live on our creative work. That the Black lesbian writer must create our home, you said. And this home, girls, is a home. You all were imaginary kin to me in my growing girlhood. The pieces of me I could only make sense of by reading you. Relief is the word to describe my feeling when I first held a copy of this book and read Cheryl Clarke's The Failure to Transform, Homophobia in the Black Community. Thank you, Cheryl, for calling a thing, for noting the clear ways that homophobia is in service to white supremacy, and naming the rampant adoption of the harmful ideology by Black people to and on Black people. I hope you understand how valuable reading your words in Homegirls and truly all of those anthologies, this bridge, everything, and also in your own collections of poetry, what it meant to me in my budding consciousness when I was able to know enough to pick up Homegirls as a teenager. Relief is the word because you named names. Your words were a warning. They interrupted the poison of anti-gay ideology cloaked in pro-Black love language. You saved this queer Black girl's heart and mind from certain destruction. Whew, what a relief. What a relief. I have to mention Toy Darracott built for Black poets, a home in Black poetry. What a relief I found a resting place there when graduate school rigor opened and under no uncertain terms told me that I couldn't write. What a relief for saving the embers of what could have been burned and burning reams of poems. What a relief. What a relief. For I would not have to invent anything. I could start here. I could maneuver accordingly. I could see the lies a mile ahead. I could reference a new Bible. I could write one too. I could be loved and touched in this round and brown body. I could live. What a relief. What a relief. I made it home. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. Y'all I'm about to cry. Oh my goodness. I'm like, I'm not even being honored and this is overwhelming for me. Oh my goodness. Thank you all. Like, oh my goodness. That's why I'm glad I'm not on camera. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful, Dr. Judd. Wow. Thank you so much. We have a few more speakers and thank y'all for being so patient with us. But this has been so beautiful and thank you for everyone's words. Next, we have Maya Marshall, who's the author of the debut full-length poetry collection, All the Blood Involved in Love, and the chapbook Secondhand. In 2018, she co-founded Underbelly, the journal on the practical magic of poetic revision. She works as an editor for Haymarket Books and is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Adelphi University.
Thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you, Cheryl Clarke and Barbara Smith and Alexis De Veaux and Jewelle Gomez for 40 years plus of labor, speaking up and speaking for and writing our world, your worlds, into view and into the academy and into the spaces of popular understanding that filter out of those spaces. I recognize home in other people more than I recognize it in a place. Despite my being decidedly Southern, I have moved many, many, many times in my 40 years. And so in large part, transience is my most comfortable space, and home is in the places where literature is held. And this is where I met your book. This book that Barbara Smith created with the kinship and community and friendship and trust and demand of her peers. I met it in the bookshelves of my household and then in the Harold Washington Public Library in Chicago, Illinois, my freshman year of college when I was sort of at sea and surrounded by white queerness that did not reflect or care for me. So thank you for providing to me language for joy and rage and desire and tenderness, for making very clear that graduate study was absolutely for me to take, for me to engage in, for me to train the people behind me into. So when I teach my women and literature course in the fall, it will be begun with your words as I teach the not Black youth of America a little bit about what Black feminism can offer to them. I want to say also in this little bit of time, yes, inspiration, yes, tools and resources for community teaching. Me personally, much like Bettina, I'm deeply grateful that Toy Derricott had platform, had encouragement in this book, because she then gave us Gave Khanum, the first place where I felt completely at home. Even in my household, I did not feel completely at home. And in the room where we recite the words of Lucille Clifton by memory and with love, I feel seen and completely held. So I appreciate you, Barbara, in this context, doing all of the work of herding cats that it takes to make an anthology. Make an anthology without, say, I don't know, easy computerized spreadsheets or email. I, as a book editor, I'm truly awed, and was awed when I was able to meet you for only a couple of minutes at the Socialism Conference in Chicago in 2018. To Alexis, you are a person who illustrated to me how to research when I read the absolutely beautiful and definitive anthology of a biography of Audre Lorde, and learned to write biography myself. Thank you. Thank you, Jewelle, for saying that part of love is to be demanding, to be firm, and making sure that you're seen and that you get to define yourself. I don't think I'm going to say something my peers haven't said here already, but I am deeply grateful to be finally in a room where I absolutely belong, and to know it and to be able to name it because of language you've offered me. So, thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Maya. We appreciate you so much. We have a few more folks. We're almost there at time, but listen, this has been so magical, and I'm not trying to rush anything, but just thank y'all for your words. Next up, we have Emerald Faith, who is an English PhD candidate and Advanced Opportunity Fellow at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Their research interests include 20th century African-American literature, Black queer literatures, Black theory, and Black feminisms. So thank you so much.
Hi, excited, grateful, honored to be here. I also wrote a thing, and I'm going to read it because I am nervous. So I'm just going to read it. Okay, cool. Homegirls, a Black feminist anthology, feels like a mirror. While reading Barbara Smith's essay, Home, I didn't expect to be met with such a visceral encapsulation of what living life in my 20s without my mom has felt like. What I have tried and sometimes failed to express almost exactly to friends and lovers. In the essay, Smith writes, quote, "But I wonder how someone can know me if they can't know my family, if there's no current information to tell. Never say to a friend, a lover, I talked to my mother yesterday and she said, Nothing to tell, just a blank where all that is supposed to be, end quote. If Ms. Barbara and I were in conversation, I would add to this something about the other kind of silence that settles in when you've shared all the memories that your brain can conjure, and that thing happens when you realize you've already told the story. As a Black South Dyke only child raised in a Black churchy family, I was one of those then Black girls with a, quote, passionate, complicated relationship with my mother, end quote, that Smith writes about. Emphasis on both passionate and complicated. Homegirls make space for the tender complexity of a life lived as a Black girl and now living as a Black genderqueer and sometimes gender confused person who was raised by a Black woman mother. This essay feels like an affirmation in accepting the fact of grief as a central part of my own Black lesbian feminist, Black South Dyking praxis, sensibility, disposition, and the possibilities and beauty in what I am allowed to imagine through unimagined loss. Like Ms. Barbara, I too will only dream about taking a lover home to my mom, what the house would smell like when we walked in because of whatever full spread she was cooking in the kitchen, or if she'd insist on Waffle House. If the tree in the front yard would be fully bloomed with the droopy magenta flowers, if she'd still be making a fuss about my bald head or tell me I look more and more like her with short hair. I won't ever know the answers to these questions, but Homegirls nudges my impulse to extrapolate on the glimpses of recognition my mom offered in her final days, to let the beauty of my dreams take up space, filling gaps, and hold me. Homegirls and its contributors, as crucial to a kind of Black lesbian literary archive, meditate on the distinct, if stolen and elusive, yet life-giving intimacy of a Black lesbian coming home, to themselves and to the ones that are remade with a lover or friends or some blurry combination through an amalgam of textures, sounds, memories, and ephemera. One of my favorite iterations of this is Jewelle Gomez's The Gilda Stories and the trunk that Gilda carries, collecting items from each place alongside the Mississippi soil as a literal and figurative life-sustaining force. In revisiting Gilda and this idea of home as an amalgam, I reflected on my own knapsack of things, an arsenal of sorts that keeps me connected and grounded in what feels like ongoing groundlessness, like the bracelet I gifted to my mother for Mother's Day 4 months before her death, a fountain pen a lover gifted me as a Christmas gift after my love for cursive writing reemerged, an Aretha Franklin vinyl record for the sole purpose of ushering my mother's spirit into a room, these emerald green and gold utensils a friend gave me when I passed my preliminary exams. Homegirls and its writers both reflect how we are often forced into territories of the unknown and the unsure, and encourage us to lean into these mysteries and voids. When I was preparing my remarks, I pulled Cheryl Clarke's collection, Living as a Lesbian, from my shelf and turned to her poem, Journal Entry Sisters, after rereading Alexis De Veaux' short story, The Sisters and Homegirls. In a parallel that I had not previously taken note of between these texts, De Veaux and Clarke underscore the feelings, possibilities, and limits of the sometimes purposeful opacity of Black queer intimate relationships. Something like that one best friend many of us have had. On the push to get cozy in the unknown, for me in a Black genderqueer and gender confused way, is something like what Alexis De Veaux articulates in the section Flesh of her text Yabo, a book itself that reaches across time and space in all directions. She writes, quote, "There are openings in that we call flesh. We call the openings in flesh pores, minute orifices, vents. Time too has pores, openings in the flesh, vents, through which we cross into our multiplicities, lives happening at the same time," end quote. Or, as she writes in the preface to her forthcoming Jesus Devil, The Parables, quote, "to live in the states of being not yet in existence," end quote. Homegirls offers an instructive on how to do this life thing otherwise. These remarks are hopefully something like a love letter of deep gratitude. So I say thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much,
Amazing.
Emerald.
So amazing.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Up next, we have Micha Broadnax, who's the project manager for the Black Teacher Archive. Informed by Black feminist imagination, she pursued the library profession to explore archiving as a practice of self-care and the activation of archival spaces for community building. So thank you so much, Micha.
Thank you, Jamie, for your practice of reverence work and extending the invitation for me to offer remarks on the 40th anniversary of Homegirls. I first crossed paths with this remarkable anthology in a queer community space as I transitioned out of college, attending a monthly discussion hosted by the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition in Boston. I made sure to sit next to the only woman present. She was raving about Homegirls and suggested I acquire it as soon as possible. To my surprise, it wasn't a newly published text, yet the words spoke to my soul. The year was 2013. It was my first encounter with the experimental form of anthology that included multiple experiences, writing styles, and approaches taking refuge under Black feminism. I had evidence that I exist because you all existed and dared to share. You gave me context in a Black lesbian feminist home. We delight in the fruits that you all have planted, as each of you have canons unto yourself and in relationship with each other. And thank you each for incorporating, as Ancestor Audre Lorde said, the uses of the erotic. We have gathered as the grateful inheritors of your production, and I'd like to use my time, just as my siblings have done, to give you each virtual verbal flowers. Thank you, Barbara, for doulaing a new life for this work through heeding the need for this collection to exist distinctly from its Conditions 5 origin. As you took on the collaborative and organizational work of editing, you have quilted an artifact. Your theoretical work is foundational as you have helped to create a home where Black women's interiority can disrobe, dream, be introspective, critique, and dare to long. Thank you for extending the traditions of the women of 132nd Street. Thank you, Alexis, for the titillating ways you play with form and taboo. Your work makes me be more gentle with conflicting desires inside and between myself and others. You grow my comfort with tenderness. Knowing we got to have an heir makes me better at thinking about how I compromise with lovers. Thank you, Jewelle, for taking on the task of reviewing the landscape of media representation of Black lesbians time and time again. In addition to being a creative, engaging in many forms, I want to appreciate your tradition of not only speaking to a legacy of denied and discovered, but describing and dismantling erasure, yet also giving us gifts of your own art. Your analysis gives context to those of us who look to understand our invisibility. In Homegirls, you remind us that Black lesbians are deserving of seeing depictions of Black lesbians in a believable cultural context in an artful way, and that home is a rich setting for an artist to engage. Thank you, Cheryl, for your bashful butch energy and reminding us that we as Black lesbians are here, there, and everywhere all at once. It was your vision and your words that spoke to eradicating a heterosexual supremacy that sought to erase us. Thank you for making clear our obligation to suggest, promote, advocate the rights of queer folks. And that homophobia, and I add transphobia, is a measure of how far removed we are from psychological transformation we so desperately need to engender. As an archivist, I have a great admiration for the published word and documentation and communication technology that is books. Glory, hallelujah, that you knew, all of you, how to document, preserve, excavate, honor, and appreciate the profound activism that Black women engage in through their communal practices with one another. Through our various forms of resistance, engaging radical forms of care for one another, we continue to freedom dream a revolution built upon the practice of liberation articulated in Homegirls all those years ago. It is as relevant, palatable, and purposeful today as when Barbara first wrote these words and admonished us to recall the possibilities inherently found in a Black feminist freedom network. And she noted, unlike any other movement, Black feminism provides the theory that clarifies the nature of Black women's experience, makes possible positive support from other Black women, and encourages political action that will change the very system that has put us down. Homegirls was giving us what we didn't even know we needed, and we are internally grateful, ready, and determined to live freely as Black radical feminists. You all have taught us so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Micha. That was so beautiful. Thank you. Last but not least, we have the Reverend Irene Monroe, who is an ordained minister, motivational speaker, and she speaks for a sector of society that is frequently invisible. Reverend Irene Monroe, thank you so much for being here. I'm about to spotlight you right now. Reverend Monroe.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry. Thank you for this invitation here. I've had the pleasure of meeting all of you. Jewelle, I met you here in Boston when I first came here to do my doctorate. Cheryl, you invited me to come talk to your class. Alexis, I'm a girl from Brooklyn, and I met you many decades ago in New York City when I was part of Salsa Soul Sisters and also the writing group Sisterhood here. And now Barbara Smith. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to read my remarks here. For Women's History Month this year, I wrote an article for Boston Magazine titled An Enduring Influence, Black, Lesbian, and Feminist Voices of the Combahee River Collective Still Leading the Way. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Barbara Smith. In our Zoom interview, I showed her I had not one, but 2 copies of the first printing of Homegirls. I shared with Barbara Smith that the same year Homegirls came out was the same year I did too. I stopped conversion therapy and went to seminary to heed my calling to be a minister. And I've been a decades-long ardent admirer of Smith and the book ever since. Smith told me in our interview, you're not the first person to tell me they use it as a sacred text. She then said, laughing, as I joined in with her, I'm an atheist, but I have spiritual leanings not associated with any organized religion. Then she went on to say, it tickles me that people of different backgrounds find value from it. Finding my spiritual voice had been an arduous journey until this anthology. I had no language that adequately articulated the unique embodiment of my spirituality. For me, Homegirls became a canon for survival, my Bible and my talking book, speaking to my social reality, unequivocally saying that Black feminist lesbians' lives are sacred texts. It created for me a countervoice to Black church heteropatriarchy. It functioned as a holy text and a subjugated knowledge that became a tool that not only gave me a voice and visibility, but also power. And with that power, I came out of the closet. I would tell my heterosexual and homophobic church brothers and sisters and seminarians and professors that gay people love Jesus as much as straight people, and we're not children of a lesser God. These same people, however, would tell me that they had the Lord on their side, and my sexual orientation is both an abomination to our Black community and to God. But I would snap back and I would tell them I had the Lord on my side too, and her name is Audre Lorde, who said, your silence will not protect you, creating a paradigm shift in me and what religion, spirituality, and theology can be. Homegirls affirmed my deep longing for a oneness with God, showed me how to find it, and told me not to let other people dictate what my relationship with God is going to be. This quote from Barbara sustained me through my doctorate, and it says, Black women whose experience is unique are seldom recognized as a particular social cultural entity and are seldom thought to be important enough for serious scholarly consideration. Homegirls helped me construct a spiritual vernacular and a Black feminist lesbian public theology that helps speak to and for Black queer spiritual sensibilities. Each section of the anthology represent a mode of speaking about Black women's personal stories that reinforce spiritual identity. Homegirls showed that as women of the African diaspora, our presence has always forged an intersectionality with life and living long before it became a word in the public discourse and a reality embedded in the academy. For the first time in print, the anthology's writings made visible Black lesbian lives like mine, who were too often omitted from print, because much that was written at that time about lesbian was by and for white women. Homegirls also showed me that Black women's writings are subversive and a political necessity. And it's a timeless tome because of its relatability in building a bridge for future generations. Homegirls educated me to understand that our lives are sacred texts, not in spite of our challenges, but rather because of them. Today, we call it Black girl magic, and it is a power and energy derived from a Black womanist ancestral tradition, spirituality, and wisdom. And what is that, some might ask? Well, it's the fire in our spirit, the cadence in our speech, the weight of our blues, and the protection of ourselves and our sisterhood. Homegirls is my Bible, the good book, the gospel according to Black women's lives. And like any Bible, it gives an indestructible strength that helps me when I'm down to get up, to get through, and to get over. A tsunami of thanks to all you sisters. Ashe and amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Irene Monroe. That was so beautiful. I'm just thankful to each and every person who offered their remarks. I'm just so thankful that we have the Duchess, Miss Jewelle Gomez, Alexis De Veaux, Cheryl Clarke, Barbara Smith. It's our honor to celebrate you. You have given us so much life, and I hope that this event showed that today. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you for offering us the beauty of all of these writers and speakers, and activists. Every day that we spent toiling over getting that damn book together is worth it just for today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie, for all that you've done, you and Emerald and everyone, for all that you've done to make tonight happen and to let us bear witness to the importance of community and of faith in our creative experiences. So thanks to you and to Emerald and to everyone who spoke. I feel overcome. It was an amazing event to witness.
Amazing. And excellent.
I'd like to say thank you as well. I was busily trying to write little notes to everyone after they spoke, and there's one person who I missed, so I'll have to check in with you, Jamie, so I can get a little note. They are not profound notes. They just say, wow, thank you. So here's to another 40 years. That's all I can say.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And thank you so much to you, Jamie, and to Black Women Radicals and all who work with you for having the vision to want to have this celebration. It's really very special.
Yeah, Jamie.
Thank you all so much.
Jamie. Good job.
Thank you. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. I will be crying after I end the Zoom call because I'm so full, but thank you all. It's been appreciate you all so much. Miss Barbara, Jewelle, Alexis, I'm gonna call you Miss Cheryl too, because I can't help it. It was hard saying calling y'all by your first names. I'm so sorry, I can't help it. But thank you all, everyone. Have a great night. And this event will be available on our YouTube. So thank you so much. 40 years of Homegirls.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So long, friends.
Bye.
So long, friends.
Love you. Love you.
Bye.
Take care, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care to all of you as well.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
Barbara.